When we think about the invention of agriculture, it's so easy to picture some single genius having a big light bulb moment. But the real story, it's way more interesting than that. It wasn't just one idea, it was this global wave of human ingenuity. Okay, let's get into it.
And that brings us to the big question, right? How is it that halfway across the world, people who had absolutely no contact with each other started domesticating completely different plants all around the same time? The answer really tells us something fundamental about how we adapt.
So here's the main takeaway. Agriculture wasn't an invention that just spread from one place to another. Nope, it was a solution that popped up independently all over the planet as different groups of people tackled the exact same problem using whatever they had right in front of them. And what was that huge, universal problem? Well, it was the most basic one of all, securing a predictable, reliable source of food. For our ancestors, figuring that out wasn't a hobby. It was literally a matter of life and death. I mean, really try to wrap your head around this. No supermarkets, no refrigeration, no global supply chains. A single bad season, a drought, a flood, wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a catastrophe. So early farming was a direct response to that constant, gnawing risk. It was humanity's first big step toward food security. So let's do this. Let's go on a little tour. We're going to travel across the ancient world and see how all these different groups, in totally different environments, all managed to crack the code of farming. First up, we're heading to what you might know as the Fertile Crescent. This is kind of the classic starting point for the story of agriculture, where people zeroed in on the grains and pulses that billions of us still eat today. Now, this is where it gets really cool. Wild grasses, right? They want to scatter their seeds everywhere. That's how they reproduce. But what early farmers did, probably without even realizing it at first, was they started picking plants with this tiny genetic mutation where the seeds stayed on the stalk. This non-shattering trait is what made harvesting possible, but it also created this new relationship where the plant literally depended on humans to survive. And they were so smart about this. They didn't just grow one thing. Wheat gave them calories, energy, but lentils. Lentils were the protein. And not just that, lentils are a legume, so they naturally put nutrients back into the soil. It was this perfect, sustainable little system for their growing villages.
Okay, let's pack our bags and head to a totally different environment, Southeast Asia. The whole approach to farming here was completely different. It was less about planting every year and more about playing the long game. They focused on perennials, and specifically citrus trees. Now, unlike wheat, a tree is a real commitment, right? It takes years and years to grow and produce fruit. This tells us these communities had a different mindset. They were planning for the future, for seasons, and maybe even generations down the line. And the payoff for that long-term investment was massive. Citrus wasn't just food. It was this incredible multi-tool. You're getting essential vitamins, amazing flavor for your food, stuff you could use for medicine, and eventually a really valuable thing you could trade. Okay, on to our next stop, Africa. We're talking about environments here that were way more challenging. In these places, the name of the game wasn't just about getting a big harvest. It was about sheer survival in the face of intense heat and drought. And meet the hero of this part of the story, pearl millet. This grain's superpower is that it is just ridiculously tough. When rain is unreliable, you don't care about a crop that's amazing in a perfect year. You need a crop that will give you something. Even in the worst years, pearl millet was the ultimate insurance policy. And it wasn't alone. A bit further east in Ethiopia, people domesticated finger millet. Its claim to fame, you could store it for a crazy long time. This was absolutely crucial for having a food reserve to get through those devastating droughts. All right, let's hop across the Atlantic now, over to the Americas. One of the very first plants domesticated here shows us yet another brilliant multi-purpose solution. Squash was kind of the perfect starter crop. You could eat the flesh, of course. You could eat the seeds, which are super nutritious. But the real game changer was that many types of squash could be stored for months, getting people through the lean winter season. And over time, farmers selected for ones with bigger seeds and thicker rinds, making them even better. For our final stop, we're heading to a place you've definitely heard of, Mesopotamia. But here's the twist. The big innovation here wasn't a new kind of plant. It was a revolutionary technology for managing the most important resource of all, water. See, the thing about irrigation is that it's just as much a social technology as it is a physical one.
You can't dig a massive canal system by yourself. It forces people to cooperate, to plan community projects, and to create rules about who gets water and when. That complex social organization, well, that's the foundation for the world's first big cities. So at this point, you're probably wondering, okay, this all sounds great, but how on earth do we actually know any of this stuff? And that is an excellent question. Archaeologists have this whole sophisticated toolkit for piecing together this ancient puzzle. It's really like a detective story, and they have all these different clues. First, they use things like radiocarbon dating to put everything on a timeline. Then they look for the obvious stuff, the smoking gun, actual plant remains like little charred seeds. But the real magic is in the micro details, like finding ancient pollen or starch grains still stuck to old tools. And finally, the tools themselves tell a story. There's this unique polish, a gloss, that forms on a sickle blade only when it's been used to harvest grain over and over. Okay, so let's zoom out. When we step back and look at our whole tour, this beautiful global pattern just snaps into focus. It's not some random collection of plants. It's this incredible mosaic of human ingenuity. And this chart right here, it basically sums up the whole story. Every single solution was perfectly tailored to its local environment. You had wheat and lentils for that Mediterranean climate, super tough millets for hot, dry Africa, long-term citrus trees in Indo-China, storable squash in Mexico, and of course irrigation for those big river valleys. And that's really the bottom line. The birth of agriculture wasn't a single event. It was thousands of years of trial and error, of careful observation and clever experiments, carried out by countless communities all around the world, all working toward building a more secure future for themselves. Which kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. This ancient map shows how different groups of people found unique local solutions to a global problem. It really makes you wonder, in our modern, super globalized world, what powerful local solutions to our big challenges might we be overlooking right now?